Shamasaki, do you have Giriraj Maharaj on the screen? Giriraj Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai, please accept mine.
Krishna. Thank you so very much for leading us in this celebration of Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta. We understand that you had the great fortune of being with Srila Prabhupada as he was composing his final words of the Caitanya-caritāmṛta. And is that going to be the subject of your talk today?
Yes, it will be.
Wow. Wow. This is fantastic. Maharaj, really don't need to introduce you, of course. You are most famous personality. But I just one quick question. I had understood that Srila Prabhupada, he actually said Giriraj is Bombay, and Bombay is Giriraj, and Bombay is like Kurukshetra, and Giriraj is like Arjuna. Did he say these words?
Yes, he did.
Wow, that is so fantastic. If I could just say a few words of the celebrating Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta that the GBC strategic planning team is engaged in during this period of time, would that be okay?
Please do.
Okay, thank you. Our team, of course, started with trying to help the devotees with COVID, being aware of it, etc., and we're still doing that. But then we also moved into providing devotees with meaningful times and events with many of our leaders around the movement. And so we were also then doing that. When we started to approach back at the beginning of the year, knowing that Gaur Purnima was coming, we decided to put together this celebration of Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta. And you are leading us off in that effort at the beginning. We started with Advaita's appearance day 2 days ago, and now we're going to hear from you. We're covering many, many aspects of Caitanya-caritāmṛta, the historical position, elements of our philosophy, the importance of prasadam, the inner meanings of Sri Gauranga and Nitai. And so I'd like our audience to know that they should pay attention to our calendar. We have over 75 devotees that will come after you in portraying different aspects of the Caitanya-caritāmṛta between now and Gaur Purnima. So it's a very wonderful thing that we're attempting here. Maharaj, you're known for a very astute, you have a very astute memory of Srila Prabhupada and interactions. And if I might add, you also offer the meaning of these interactions often. And you've composed one of your newest books. Maybe it's one of your best books. I don't know. Maybe it's the best. Shamasaki, could you just show the picture of that on the screen? I'll Build You a Temple, the Juhu Story by Giriraj Maharaj. So I think that part of what you're saying is coming from that book, or at least it's a portion of it.
Yes, the event is described in the book, and it was a significant event, and it's yeah. But I would say the Juhu book really quite thoroughly covers Srila Prabhupada in Bombay.
Is it, to a certain extent, maybe even to a very large extent, almost like an instruction book of how to deal with builders, governments, under all great strain and difficulty, how to make a temple?
Some people have said that.
It's
like a manual, a book.
Right. So we would encourage our audience to obtain a copy of this. You see the link to Maharaj's book down at the bottom here, thejuhustory.com. And so with that in mind, then, we're just about ready to begin. Maharaj, today you're going to give us a Bhagavatam type or style class. And then at the end, if you wish, I'll come back to thank you. And maybe I have one question in my mind that I'll ask at the end, if it fits once I hear you. But without further ado, Maharaj, please lead us in this Bhagavatam style class. You're all set to go.
All right. Well, I'll begin by singing the Mangalacharana prayers and leading a short kirtan, and then speak about Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatham Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Chatarine. Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta Śrīvasadi Gaur Bhakta-vrinda. Śrī Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Śrī Gadadhar Śrīvasadi Gaur Bhakta-vrinda. Śrī Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Śrī Gadadhar Śrīvasadi Gaur Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Śrīla Prabhupada. Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Śrīla Guru Deva. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Pariprajakacharya Stotra Satasri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Pariprajakacharya Stotra Satasri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Śrī Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Sham Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So I will discuss the glorious occasion of Srila Prabhupada's completion of Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta. Just before 6 every morning, I would walk up the stairs to Srila Prabhupada's room at the back of Hare Krishna land, to accompany him on his morning walk. But when another devotee and I went on the day after Rama Ekadasi, we were surprised to find the doors, both to his quarters on one side and to his staff's quarters on the other, locked. I wasn't sure what to do, but I gently knocked on both doors. After a minute or two, Prabhupada's secretary, Harikesh, opened the assistant's door just a little and said that Prabhupada had stayed up all night and completed his translation of Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta, and that at the end he had written the most beautiful glorification of his Guru Maharaj, and that he was in an ecstatic mood and had said that we should celebrate by having a feast. Well, now I shall read from Srila Prabhupada's concluding words and comment. Quote, today, Sunday, November 10th, 1974, corresponding to the 10th of Kartik, Chaitanya era, the 11th day of the dark fortnight, the Rama Ekadasi, we have now finished the English translation of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta in accordance with the authorized order of His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj, my beloved eternal spiritual master, guide, and friend. So as I read the concluding words, I will comment. And I was struck by this very first sentence's description of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, my eternal spiritual master, guide, and friend. Yes, the spiritual master is our friend. Krishna is our best friend, and the spiritual master, as the representative of Krishna, is also our best friend. Although according to material vision, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, passed away from this material world on the last day of December 1936, I still consider His Divine Grace to be always present with me by His Vani, His words. There are two ways of association, by Vani and by Vapu. Vani means words, and Vapu means physical presence. Physical presence is sometimes appreciable and sometimes not, but Vani continues to exist eternally. So here in the first paragraph, Srila Prabhupada sets the theme for the entire concluding words, which is his relationship with his spiritual master, and in particular, how his relationship with his spiritual master has continued on the basis of Vani, or the divine instructions that he received from his spiritual master. As Srila Prabhupada wrote in his dedication to his translation of Srimad Bhagavatam, dedicated to my spiritual master. He lives forever by his divine instructions, and the follower lives with him. And we disciples of Srila Prabhupada are also sustaining our lives by his association through his vani, or instructions, by following to the best of our ability his instructions. So, vani means words, and vapu means physical presence. Physical presence is sometimes appreciable and sometimes not, but vani continues to exist eternally. Therefore, we must take advantage of the vani, not the physical presence. The Bhagavad Gita, for example, is the vani of Lord Krishna. Although Krishna was personally present 5,000 years ago and is no longer physically present from the materialistic point of view, the Bhagavad Gita continues. So, by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, which are his vani, and of course in particular today we're focusing on Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta, we get his association. And not only his association, but we also get the association of all the previous acharyas, because Srila Prabhupada has referred to the previous acharyas' commentaries in his own purports. So we get the association of Srila Prabhupada and the entire disciplic succession when we read his books, such as Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta. Srila Prabhupada continues, in this connection, we may call to memory the time when I was fortunate enough to meet His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, sometime in the year 1922. Srila Prabhupada had come to Calcutta from Sridham Mayapur to start the missionary activities of the Gaudiya Math. He was sitting in a house at Ultadanga when, through the inducement of an intimate friend, the late Sriman Narendranath Malik, I had the opportunity to meet His Divine Grace for the first time. So Srila Prabhupada explained that he was the leader of his circle of friends, and they wanted his opinion, or in a way you could say his approval, of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So they wanted to bring him to meet His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to give his decision or his verdict. Srila Prabhupada continues, I do not remember the actual date of the meeting, but at that time I was one of the managers of Dr. Bose's laboratory in Calcutta. I was a newly married young man, addicted to Gandhi's movement, and dressed in khadi. Fortunately, even at our first meeting, His Divine Grace advised me to preach the cult of Śrī Caitanya Mahaprabhu in English in the Western countries. Because at that time, I was a complete nationalist, a follower of Mahatma Gandhi's, I submitted to His Divine Grace that unless our country were freed from foreign subjugation, no one would hear the message of Śrī Caitanya Mahaprabhu seriously. Of course, we had some argument on this subject, but at last I was defeated. And Srila Prabhupada has commented that up until then, he had never been defeated in any argument. But he was defeated by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he was glad that he was defeated. Of course, coming back to the concluding words, of course, we had some argument on this subject, but at last I was defeated and convinced that Śrī Caitanya Mahaprabhu's message is the only panacea for suffering humanity. I was also convinced that the message of Śrī Caitanya Mahaprabhu was then in the hands of a very expert devotee, and that surely the message of Śrī Caitanya Mahaprabhu would spread all over the world. I could not, however, immediately take up his instructions to preach, but I took his words very seriously and was always thinking of how to execute his order, although I was quite unfit to do so. So here is another important instruction: that we may receive an order from the spiritual master, but due to circumstances, we may not be able to execute the order immediately. But we should always keep the order within our heart and await the opportunity, pray for the opportunity to execute the order. I had my own experience with Srila Prabhupada in relation to this principle. When I was in Boston as a new devotee, the temple president, Satsvarupa Das Adhikari, then, was the editor of Back to Godhead magazine. And he wanted articles. So I wrote an article about the spiritual master. But because of the natural delay between the time that the article was submitted and the time that the magazine was published, I was in India with Srila Prabhupada when the magazine came to his hands. So Srila Prabhupada called for me, and he said, I have read your article. It is very nice. You should write. You should take up writing as your first business. So this was a very significant instruction. He gave others in that meeting, which also guide me until today. But he did instruct me, you should take up writing as your first business. So I went and got some lined paper and pens. We didn't have computers then, so that I could write. In the meantime, Srila Prabhupada went on to Bombay to for the first Bombay Pandal program, and he asked devotees in different places to come to Bombay. So, as usual, well, no, before that. So when I got to Bombay, Shamsundar Prabhu was the temple president. And he said that we are, we're collecting for the first Bombay Pandal. And so I want you to collect. And I said, well, Srila Prabhupada told me to write. And Shamsundar Prabhu replied, you can write anytime, but this is one time in the year when we can approach businessmen and ask them to give advertisements for our souvenir book. And they don't even really have to pay out of their own pockets. They can deduct it as a business expense. So I thought about what he said, and it made sense. And I knew that Srila Prabhupada wanted us to cooperate with our authorities. So I agreed. Then, after some time, Srila Prabhupada came. And as was usual, he would come into his room, and the devotees would file in, and he would glance lovingly at his disciples and exchange some words with them. So when he came to me, he said, so Giriraj, how is your writing going? And I was completely flustered. I didn't know what to say because I wasn't writing at all. So he could see my condition. He said, all right, we'll talk later. Then after all the devotees left, Srila Prabhupada called for me. And I told him what Shamsundar Prabhu had said. And I also explained that I thought that what Shamsundar Prabhu said made sense, and that you wanted us to cooperate with our authorities. So I did what he said, and I set aside my writing to collect for the Panda. But I was very apprehensive because I didn't know how Srila Prabhupada would respond. But Srila Prabhupada was very kind and understanding and practical also. And he said that one can keep the order of the spiritual master in abeyance. That means, temporarily suspended. That one can keep the order of the spiritual master in abeyance, but one can never neglect it. And then he kindly said that my spiritual master instructed me to write, but I have been so busy traveling and preaching in India, I also have had very little time to write. But when the opportunity comes, I will take it up again. So this is an instruction for all of us that if, due to circumstances, we are unable to take up an order immediately, we should keep that order in our heart and await the time and circumstances, and perhaps pray for the opportunity to execute the order. So now back to Srila Prabhupada's concluding words. I could not, however, immediately take up his instruction to preach, but I took his words very seriously and was always thinking of how to execute his order, although I was quite unfit to do so. In this way, I passed my life as a householder until 1950, when I retired from family life as a vanaprastha. With no companion, I loitered here and there until 1958, when I took sannyas. Then I was completely ready to discharge the order of my spiritual master. Previously, in 1936, just before His Divine Grace passed away, I wrote him a letter asking what I could do to serve him. In reply, he wrote me a letter dated 13th December 1936, ordering me in the same way to preach in English the cult of Śrī Caitanya Mahaprabhu as I had heard it from him. So, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur confirmed the same instruction that he had given Srila Prabhupada in their first meeting. And thus, Srila Prabhupada had no doubt about what his mission was. Back to the concluding words. After he passed away, he started, I'm reading his words. After he, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, passed away, I started the fortnightly magazine Back to Godhead sometime in 1944 and tried to spread the cult of Śrī Caitanya Mahaprabhu through this magazine. After I took sannyas, a well-wishing friend suggested that I write books instead of magazines. Magazines, he said, might be thrown away, but books remained perpetually. So here's another important instruction, that we can receive guidance from the spiritual master through others, if we are open to it. And again, I had a similar experience with Srila Prabhupada and a well-wishing friend named Bridgerton Mahota, who suggested to Srila Prabhupada that he include an excerpt from the Bhagavad Gita in every issue of Back to Godhead magazine. And Srila Prabhupada took the suggestion seriously and adjusted it a little. And so there's always an installment of Srimad Bhagavatam in every issue of Back to Godhead magazine. So the spiritual master can speak to us in many ways, and he can do so through well-wishing friends who are not even really devotees as such, but they're well-wishing friends. So after I took sannyas, a well-wishing friend suggested that I write books instead of magazines. Magazines, he said, might be thrown away, but books remain perpetually. Then I attempted to write Srimad Bhagavatam. Before that, when I was a householder, I had written on Srimad Bhagavad Gita and had completed about 1,100 pages. But somehow or other, the manuscript was stolen. You can see how determined Srila Prabhupada was. You know, he never became discouraged. Or he might temporarily have felt discouraged, but he never lost his determination to serve his spiritual master. And as we all know, Srila Prabhupada went on and wrote the Bhagavad Gita as it is So, I had written on Srimad Bhagavad Gita and had completed about 1,100 pages, but somehow or other the manuscript was stolen. In any case, when I had published Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto in 3 volumes in India, I thought of going to the USA. And Srila Prabhupada is so humble, describing his coming to the USA. He said that that Srimad Bhagavatam came to America, and I went with it. When I had published Srimad Bhagavatam, I thought of going to the USA. By the mercy of His divine grace, I was able to come to New York on September 17th, 1965. Since then, I have translated many books, including Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, a summary, and many others. In the meantime, I was induced to translate Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta and publish it in an elaborate version. In his leisure time in later life, His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would simply read Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta. It was his favorite book. He used to say that there would be a time when foreigners would learn the Bengali language to read the Caitanya-caritāmṛta. The work on this translation began about 18 months ago. Now, by the grace of Śrī Caitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it is finished. In this connection, I have to thank my American disciples, especially Shriman Pradumya Das Adhikari, Shriman Nitai Das Adhikari, Shriman Jayadwaita Das Brahmachari, and many other boys and girls who are sincerely helping me in writing, editing, and publishing all these literatures. So we can see in Srila Prabhupada's concluding words that he does not take any personal credit for anything. He gives the credit in an upward direction to his Guru Maharaj and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he gives the credit, you could say, in a downward direction to his disciples. He's so humble. He doesn't take any credit for any of it for himself. Now, the next paragraph is striking and significant. I think that His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, is always seeing my activities and guiding me within my heart by His words. So that is true. We receive an instruction from the spiritual master and keep it in our hearts, and the instruction becomes our guidance. But here, Srila Prabhupada will go on to explain how he is getting guidance from his spiritual master within his heart in a radically different way. I think that His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, is always seeing my activities and guiding me within my heart by His words. As it is said in Srimad Bhagavatam, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye. Spiritual inspiration comes from within the heart, where in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in His Paramatma feature, is always sitting with all His devotees and associates. So not only is the Paramatma in our heart, but he is there along with His devotees and associates, which includes the spiritual master. So Srila Prabhupada took it in a very literal way that his spiritual master was in his heart and guiding him. It is to be admitted that whatever translation work I have done is through the inspiration of my spiritual master. Because personally, I am most insignificant and incompetent to do this materially impossible work. So again, Srila Prabhupada gives the credit to his spiritual master. I do not think myself a very learned scholar, but I have full faith in the service of my spiritual master. His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. If there is any credit to my activities of translating, it is all due to His Divine Grace. So again and again and again, Srila Prabhupada refuses to take any credit for himself, but he gives all the credit to his spiritual master and to his disciples, who he sometimes said were the representatives of his spiritual master, whom his spiritual master had sent to help him. If there is any credit to my activities of translating, it is all due to His Divine Grace. Certainly, if His Divine Grace were physically present at this time, it would have been a great occasion for jubilation. But even though He is not physically present, I am confident that He is very much pleased by this work of translation. He was very fond of seeing many books published to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Therefore, our society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, has been formed to execute the order of Śrī Caitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So here Srila Prabhupada is saying that ISKCON has been formed to publish and distribute books. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was very fond of seeing many books published to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Therefore, our society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, has been formed to execute the order of Śrī Caitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It is my wish that the devotees of Lord Chaitanya all over the world will enjoy this translation. So we should read Srila Prabhupada's translation of Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta. As he once said, referring to the devotees, distributing my books will keep them happy, and reading my books will keep them. Means keep them in Krishna consciousness, keep them in devotional service. It is my wish that devotees of Lord Chaitanya all over the world enjoy this translation, and I am glad to express my gratitude to the learned men in the Western countries who are so pleased with my work that they are ordering in advance all my books that will be published in the future. Yes, devotees will get standing orders from libraries for all of Srila Prabhupada's future books as well. And one of the leaders in that field was, at the time, Ghanshyam Das, who later became His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami. On this occasion, therefore, I request all my disciples, and we're all, directly or indirectly, Srila Prabhupada's disciples. On this occasion, therefore, I request my disciples who are determined to help me in this work to continue their cooperation fully, so that philosophers, scholars, religionists, and people in general all over the world will benefit by reading our transcendental literatures, such as Srimad Bhagavatam and Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta. So here Srila Prabhupada is including us in his concluding words and entrusting us with an aspect of his mission. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta, dated November 10th, 1974, at the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, Hare Krishna Land, Juhu, Bombay. Jai. Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So I have used up exactly the official time allotted to me, but I will take the opportunity to thank you all for joining us for this discussion of the beautiful Caitanya-caritāmṛta and Srila Prabhupada's successful completion of the translation. And yeah, we should do justice and make Srila Prabhupada's efforts successful by reading his books, and in particular now, Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta. Generally, Srila Prabhupada would retire for the night at about 10 p.m., and he would wake up at midnight after only 2 hours of rest and translate. While we were all sleeping, he would be awake translating. So we should, show our appreciation and gratitude for his tireless efforts to give us these books by reading them and distributing them. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much. I like to purchase a book but I would like to see if you'd be willing to sign it as the author in the front cover.
Sure.
Okay.
It would be an honor and a pleasure. The books are on a ship coming from Mumbai to Los Angeles. But as soon as they arrive, which will, be in a few weeks, I will take out a copy for you and inscribe it for you.
Thank you so much. So, yes, this was very wonderful, methodically going through and explaining Srila Prabhupada's words. What if this one point that you said, okay, we'll take the instruction of the spiritual master, and if circumstances don't allow us to do this service, hold it within our heart and wait for the opportunity. What happens when you get a little bit older and the service that you want to do, but yet you're getting older and time has become so precious? What do you do under that kind of circumstance? You just start really pushing harder, or what? Sometimes it just seems like you can't wait for the circumstance to arise. You got to push through. Is that what you do?
Sometimes we do. I mean, we can't wait for every condition to be favorable, because that may not happen within our life. So then we do what we can. And another thought that crossed my mind is that we can delegate some of those services to others, so they can also contribute to the cause.
And then many disciples, they don't have direct instructions. You very fortunate to have some direct instructions.
Yeah.
But many, in fact, most of Srila Prabhupada's disciples did not have any direct instructions, and many of the devotees of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, they don't have direct instructions. What about that?
True. We have general instructions. We all have general instructions, which are to taste Krishna consciousness and share Krishna consciousness. And taste Krishna consciousness includes, chanting minimum 16 rounds daily, following the 4 regulative principles. So we have those instructions. But the question of how to get instruction when the spiritual master is no longer present, or maybe the spiritual master is present but is not, has not given us any direct instructions. I think of something that Srila Prabhupada said in different ways on numerous occasions, related to chanting. Once Satsvarupa asked Srila Prabhupada, now you are here, so we can ask you our questions. But what about when you're no longer here? How will we get answers to our questions? And Srila Prabhupada replied, the holy name is not different from Krishna. Do you realize this fact? So, and in other cases also, he indicated that we would get answers and guidance from chanting. Offenselessly, of course, but from chanting. So that's our real guidance. It may not be very relevant, but I thought of when the press was in Boston. It was called ISKCON Press then. It later became the BBT. And Srila Prabhupada would give us instructions in detail, including what should come on the cover of the book. So, you know, one of the small books that we printed in Boston was Easy Journey to Other Planets, which Srila Prabhupada had originally published in India before coming to America. And he said that on the cover, there should be like a picture of the earth, and then like outer space, and then at the top in the other corner, there should be Goloka Vrindavan with Radha and Krishna and their associates, and there should be a devotee like flying through space from the earth to Goloka Vrindavan with his japamala. The Prabhupada commented, the beads are the way that we get there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Maharaj, thank you so much. We really appreciate your valuable time. This is a wonderful way to kick off our celebrating of Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta. And we are going to hear from you again, I believe, sometime in the, maybe in the 15th through the 24th, if that's possible. We'd like to just maybe have another session with you about how to approach Radha Krishna by only going through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if that's okay.
Sure.
Think about it, and we'll see if we can schedule you again.
All right.
Okay. Thank you so much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare
Right.
Krishna.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.